So actually, if we could, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, but we'll start here with Emilie White, who is from Amnesty International, then Jason Wong, who is from Google, and Anne Kauth, who is from Minerva. It was the university that I told you about a little bit earlier. So if you would like to just tell them a little bit about yourself, that would be great. And then Jason, and then Anne.
Okay, thanks, Esther. So I'm Emilie White from Amnesty International. We're the largest human rights organization in the world. So we campaign for human rights. And I'm working in the education program, working on education technology, to use education technology to empower people to defend and promote their human rights.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name's Jason Wong. I'm a product manager at Google. I've been at Google for about 10 years. Specifically, I focus on the education side. Around the world, we have about 20 million students using Chromebook-based devices, and my day-to-day job is to figure out how we can get more educators and more students using sort of great digital tools on Chrome OS-based machines.
Awesome. And hi, I'm Anne Kauth. I manage professional development for Minerva schools at KGI. We've created a university for the 21st century focused on the skills and competencies needed by students around the world to be effective participants in a global economy. In my job, I get to work with students not only on their personal and professional goals, but also with hiring managers, heads of HR, heads of people, heads of talent, on the skills and competencies that they are prioritizing when hiring and trying to index those skills across industry areas and feed that back into our curricular design.
So thank you for those introductions. So I guess the first question that I had that I thought maybe you could talk about is basically the title of the panel, and what are you doing, or what do you think can be done to make the learning space more effective for students today? So Emilie actually represents the consumer, and so she could talk about it from that perspective. But if the audience, if you have questions that we can answer, because I know that there was, or I don't know if the movement is still happening here, there was a suggestion by Theresa May that we go back to grammar schools, which is actually pretty much the opposite of project-based learning. It's back to memorization. And the question is, how effective is that? So as I said, maybe we can have, share the space. You can still have, 50% of the time with the memorization and the other 50%. So suggestions, maybe we can start over here with Anne.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the privilege of working with a group of students from around the world who came to Minerva to have the chance to have a world-class curriculum and project-based experiences as part of our global rotation. So we had 20,000 applications this past year and enrolled our third class of about 220 students. We've got 500 students across 3 years. 75% of those students are not from the United States, and they get to spend 4 years with us learning what you would in a typical university when it comes to the majors and concentrations that they can take. So we have five colleges, 5 majors, but with an underpinning of competencies focused on a framework for approaching any given problem. So when it comes to effective communication, effective interaction, creative thinking, critical thinking, every single student has that exposure and also experiential learning, so there's a practical application, whether you are a natural sciences major, a computational sciences major, a business major, so that you can see how these frameworks are useful and can be applicable in your internships and research, and eventually in your careers. Esther made...
So, I don't think you told them how great this thing is. Seriously. Because, I wish I could, that anti-aging pill, I need to have that. Because I would like to go back to school then. They get to live in 7 different cities during the first year.
Oh, no, 7 cities over 4 years.
Oh, is it 7 cities
Yes.
over the 4 years?
That would be quite a
But
logistical
still,
feat.
7 cities, and then you get to experience real-world learning. I mean, I was in one place the whole time, you know, and I was all lecture-based. So I think, you know, you need to emphasize.
Well, yeah, we want to prepare global citizens. So whether you're from the US, from Nigeria, from Belarus, from China, we provide the opportunity to live and fully immerse globally in these 7 locations. We partner with companies, with not-for-profit organizations, with civic organizations, with government bodies. So there are project-based opportunities that are applicable to whatever the students are learning. And Esther made a plug for our platform. We were able to create a platform tied to our curriculum so that they have a fully active learning environment via our online platform, as well as residential and experiential learning in each of these cities.
So, and their acceptance rate is probably the lowest in the United States. What is it?
It is, we are 1.9% this year.
So they have all these, so it's very popular. A lot of people are trying it, it's new. And so it represents a platform for the 21st century. And I think it's a leader in this, in the university education space. And then for Jason, maybe Jason, you could talk a little bit about how Google tools empower teachers. They make their life easier and they make the students more effective as it changes the learning environment. Perhaps you talk about a few of them.
Absolutely. But first of all, yes, that university program sounds amazing. I wish that I had the chance to go to something like that when I was at university. And if you look at my day-to-day role now at Google, I'm interacting with sort of all time zones, traveling around the world. And some of those skills I've had to learn on the job throughout my 10 years at Google. If I had that going in, it would have been so much better. But to your question, Esther, yeah, so Google does a lot in this space. I see I think everyone in this room believes that sort of tech has a role and responsibility to play in sort of changing and transforming sort of classrooms around the world for these 21st century skills. I think about this in sort of 2 ways. One, if you need tech in a classroom, you need a device. You need some sort of technology, something there to really have, for those digital sort of tools to be used. And on the project that I work on very closely, Chromebooks, we've been probably a leader in this space. If you think back sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago, the cost of a basic laptop was close to sort of £500–600. And if you fast forward to today, you're closer to sort of £200 for a sort of computing device, or even lower if you're talking about tablets. And what does that mean for the classroom environment? It's meant that the technology is not confined to a room, it's not confined to the computing lab, or 1 or 2 sort of devices at the back of a classroom. It's now sort of many schools can move to sort of 2-to-1, 3-to-1 cart-based models, or even 1-to-1 schemes, where the tech is in the hands of the student more times than not. And teachers then use digital tools to help enhance the learning experience as you go along. And Chromebooks have been a sort of big driver towards that. How many of the room have heard of Chromebooks and used them? Quick hands up. Okay, good. Okay, a few. For those who don't know, just very quickly, Chromebooks are computing devices that are built, that run on Google's Chrome operating system. The operating system we build, we distribute for free to our hardware partners. And it was an operating system built very differently from your traditional operating systems. It was designed to be very lightweight, so you can run on pretty sort of affordable hardware. It's designed to be shareable, so I can log in and get my own personalized environment. Esther can log in and get her own personalized environment. It's designed to be very secure, which is very important. And it's designed to be, most importantly, very easy to manage and distribute. Because if you want the school to go from a classroom a computer lab with 30 devices through to a few hundred, you need to make sure that that added burden isn't too much and it's actually easier. So we've cracked that on the Chromebook side, and we've had a lot of success in the US with that. But that's just a tool. What you do on top of it, I think Esther showed some great examples of using sort of Google G Suite for Education, which has the collaboration at its heart, its fundamental principle. And we actually have a team based in New York under the leadership of a very inspirational product director called Jonathan Rochelle, whose whole team's sort of purpose is to build great tools for educators. So things like adapting sort of the G Suite for use in schools, building Google Classroom, which was a product built specifically just for teachers. And also another great product from that team has been Google Expeditions. But I'll pause there, otherwise I'll go on for a long time.
So Jason, here's a question from the audience already for you.
Fantastic.
Are there any steps planned to move towards the future data protection regulations in Europe? That's a pretty hot topic.
Straight in there.
I mean, shall we get to the heart of it right away?
Yes. We actually had a blog post, I think it was a month or two ago, where I think what this question is referring to, I think is the GDPR regulation that's coming into Europe in force for next year. And we've sort of publicly committed that we will be compliant when that comes in force, so I think mid-next year at some point. So.
Okay, that's
yes.
great. And then we have another question here. Well, before we go on to another question, let me just have Anne say a few things about Amnesty International and what she does and what's going on, because it's a fantastic organization. If you don't know about it, maybe you can just say a few words about it and then talk about...
Sure. I mean, maybe I'll just throw out a question to you. How many of you feel you could say what the limits to your freedom of expression are? Just raise your hand if you feel confident that you know how to say what your limit to freedom of expression is. Okay, we have one. How many would like to know what your limits to freedom of expression are? Okay, a few. That's good to see.
I think there's more. Lots of them.
How many feel confident to say what the difference is between a refugee and a migrant is? No? Okay, a couple
no,
of hands.
a few.
Yeah. And again, how many of you would actually feel that would be useful for you to know? Something you might care about. Okay. So that's what we're doing, really, is that these are universal human rights related to universal human rights. There are definitions of refugees and there are specific protections for refugees that all of our countries have a responsibility to ensuring happens. But these things, as we know, aren't really taking place. So a lot of people are really keen. So we did, before launching our first MOOCs, just at the end of 2015, we asked people, what are you looking for from us in terms of education? Because we knew we were going out to a large audience. And they said, 50% said, we want to know how to get active. We want to know how to take action to defend our human rights and those of other people. So they're keen. There's a lot of people that want to get involved, and they just don't know how. So that's what this is about. It's about empowering people. These are your human rights, and these are the human rights of other people that might not have a very strong voice. So that's what Amnesty's always done, is said, look, some of us do have a stronger voice, let's use it. We're even stronger when we get more collective. Let's have petitions, let's show how many people are upset about this. We did a survey, and we found that I think it was 80% said they would welcome refugees, but do we see that translated into actual policy? That people would actually welcome a refugee in their own home, but that's not actually very easy to do, because you need steps to be able to do that. But those things are happening, so there's very interesting things going on. We work with networks and partners, I think Amnesty is really about empowering people, because there are things that all of us can do. And all of us should know. So, I mean, often people would say, look, if your house is on fire or being bombed, what would be the first thing you would take from your house? Can anyone answer that question? Sorry? Your photos. Yeah, nice one. Any other ones? Your passport. Very smart. And I know this is a question I'm stealing from Kieran as well, but they say very few people would take their educational qualifications with them. So when you do hopefully survive and get across to somewhere safe, what are you going to do now? You don't have your qualifications. Maybe you are a surgeon, but you're not going to be recognized. And maybe you have other skills, or maybe you're young and you want to get new skills, but you don't have your passports, you don't have your identity documents, or you don't have access. So for me, it's all about exclusivity. And I think we heard from a fantastic university, but again, it's popular, but it's not, you can't get in. You have to be, I don't know how you have to prove yourself. But what we've done, we've launched massive open online courses in partnership with edX because they're massive and they're open. And that's what Amnesty is about. It's a massive global organization saying, don't just wait on us to do this. Let's do this together. Collectively, we can make a difference. We can make change. So I think education technology is for makers and doers who would like to have the skills to make and do change. So there are things they want to change. It's not just about, we know really well, like we have great things from Josh Burson at Deloitte and McKinsey. They're really clear about what skills are needed in the workforce and what's there for the economy. But when we launched...
So what are those skills that they need?
Well, I mean, it's creativity and problem solving, and all of those what used to be called soft skills that are now becoming hard to teach, or people say are difficult.
I think they're the skills that are hard to teach are the ones that everybody wants, and that's...
Hard to teach and hard to automate. That's the other piece.
And hard to test, which is part of the reason why we need to have the skills that I was actually talking about a little bit. So this is from Paul Jackman, who says, there's a huge economic and digital divide in the world. You don't need to travel far from major cities in very many countries to see this. What needs doing to bridge this divide, to ensure that everyone has these opportunities, not in 10 years, but now? What can we do to make sure that we all have these opportunities? And I mean, you were just talking about how important this is. I mean, people didn't even raise their hand and know exactly what they... So what can we do to...
Yeah, this is a... yeah, I mean, it's... we've not solved that problem. It is there. I will say, from a Google more broadly perspective, we've been looking at this sort of very, very carefully. If you look at, I think there are about 3 billion people online sort of worldwide today. Over the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think another billion will come online. And those billion will not come from the developed markets. They'll come from places like India, places like Brazil, places like Indonesia. And there's an initiative at Google called the Next Billion User Initiative, incidentally actually led by one of the original founding product managers on Chromebooks, VP called Caesars and Gupta. And they're looking at how, and it's slightly untrue in that these places don't have technology, but they do. But they just experience it in a slightly different way. They're very different from when I experienced coming online the first time, which was a beige box with the dulcet tones of a dial-up modem accompanying it. They're experiencing it on smartphones, and it's not sort of your high-end smartphones. They are kind of it's lots of second-hand phones, and there's like lots of intermittent sort of connectivity, and data is very expensive. So at Google, we're trying to build products specifically for that environment. There's actually at Google I/O, there was a great talk by one of the team talking about how to build products for the next billion users, and talks about some of their learning. So for those of you interested, I encourage you to use your favorite search engine and look that talk up. But yes, but there's definitely more to be done there.
Has to be done. It really has to be done now, not in the next 10 years. We need it now. And, you know, Chromebooks, you know, they're really inexpensive. They're easy to use. It's the #1 selling computer in the education market in the United States. I don't know about here in the United Kingdom, but they should look into it.
Rest of the world, I think they're getting there. So Sweden is now, I think last year was the most popular operating system. There's some really good traction in lots of other pockets around the world as well. So people are slowly waking up to the idea.
Good.
I also think that the nature, we think about what it means to be a university for the 21st century and to have full access for all students who want to learn and want to have the skills and abilities to participate in a global economy. We don't have any overhead costs to pass on to students. We focus on the development of a world-class curriculum, the platform to deliver that education, and we don't have cafeterias, classrooms, gymnasiums with rock climbing walls, so that, you know, what the students pay for, and about 90% of our students are on almost full financial aid. We are focused on them investing in an education that will enable them not only to be employed, but to have an adaptable skill set. We don't know what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years in the labor market in any country. So how do you ensure that they know how to identify the right problem, apply heuristics, work in teams, manage effectively, manage themselves? We've found that it's encouraging to see with our group of currently 500 students from all over the world the success that they've had, and hopefully as we grow, we will also find other institutions that are interested in having a fully active model and an immersive model, so that it isn't a question of getting into a school, but rather how can you best learn and best learn efficiently.
So here's a question for you. How many English second language speakers are on your program? I guess it looks like some people might be interested. Is your program fully inclusive, providing language support for ESL students?
Yes, so English, proficiency in English is a prerequisite for admission to Minerva. Based on where our curriculum development is at, we were created for English-speaking students. So 75% of our students are not from the US, and the majority of those are English as a second language students, but they need to be able to engage with all of the content in English. We do have support from our faculty and our deans for those students who have difficulty with higher levels of applications, with writing, with professional applications, but when it comes to English comprehension, that piece is essential.
That's great. Mm-hmm. So Emilie, we have another question for you, and I think it's an important question for actually all of us. How do we make MOOCs work for those kids who are not good at MOOCs? And MOOCs are not MOOCs, massive open online courses. They're offered by edX, who you work with, but also Udacity has them, and Coursera. And the dropout rate today is 95%. So only 5% of the people that sign up continue. So what do you think, how can we make MOOCs more effective? I have some of my ideas, but love to hear what you think.
I think that's exactly the right question to ask. So I think that we are still guilty of creating systems of education that are creating exclusivities. So it's not that people are not good at doing MOOCs, it's that we're delivering those MOOCs badly. So we really look at it as a user-centered, learner-centered, human-centered design process. We know we're not, we only started at the end of 2015. At that point, we had no idea that less than 2 years later, we would have 100,000 people showing demand in our courses on human rights, and that, I would now be in the position I am now, which is preparing for our 2 million registrations, so that we get that, because MOOCs are getting that kind of scale, and we see that kind of demand for something which is a universal topic with universal human rights. So how we actually make those better is we work with the users. We need to do user testing. We need to build from scratch with our target audiences. How do you do that when you know that people are signing up from 193 countries, and they're all, most of them English as a second language, and then all have all the other languages? Well, we have offices all across the world, so there's no reason why every one of our courses couldn't be adapted to the local environment. All they have to do is copy-paste the course and rewrite it to their own languages, and use test it with their own users to say, what's wrong with this? What do you really need? Or start from scratch, design it, saying, what do you really need? Which is how we've always done our education programs.
So we're running out of time. Unfortunately, I have like 57 seconds.
I think one helpful way to think about this and how to make MOOCs fully adaptable, any tech-enabled learning fully adaptable, is to think about the principle of instruction, and that lecturing is, as our founding dean, Stephen Coslin, who's a cognitive neuroscientist, says,
doesn't work.
That lecturing is a great way to teach. It's an awful way to learn. So the more that we can adapt MOOCs and make them interactive, even just some basic elements that make the individual learner feel engaged and not lectured to, the more successful they'll be.
So my suggestion is that the MOOCs, they have learning groups. So you can use those in schools. The teacher can show it, and then the students get together in groups and talk about what it was that was discussed. They need human interaction, and that's the main reason they're not working. It's just like nobody likes to go to the gym by themselves. Nobody likes to exercise by themselves. Everybody wants to be in a group. And so that's what's going on with MOOCs.
Well, I would challenge that to say that actually we need more bots. So we really need artificial intelligence to have that guidance for each person. It's got to be personalized, and you're never going to have that many teachers on one-to-one. But we do know from the data...
bots would be a great idea.
We need artificial intelligence to carry each person step by step through the process and to be responsive and to learn each time that we do that. And also, I think you also need blockchain to protect that, to get more people to be teachers. I think we all are teachers, and we all have expertise, and we all need to be able to deliver that. So we need some form of like blockchain ID, security, accuracy to say, okay, there's a form of accreditation. You have a record of my expertise. You know who I am. That's verified and safe and encrypted, and so we're all teachers in our way, so it's not going to be down to just education institutions, it's not going to be down to the corporate learning programs, it's actually down to all of us sharing what we know with the people who want to know that information from us.
Since we're out of time, I'll just end with something that ties right to what you're saying. Should the human teacher be replaced as a primary instructor? This is a question. And take on a secondary role in education as a guide? Can automated systems be sensitive enough to specific student needs? I think the answer to that is the teacher can never be replaced. They need human interaction. The relationship is between the student and the teacher, but the teacher needs to be supported with bots, supported with technology, and the teacher needs to see technology as the #1 support for getting information across to the students. So on that note, I'd like to thank all the panelists and thank all of you for being here for this.